best of its, it's ever been, actually. So, I have to thank the curators for working with me so closely on the installation of that piece, and also to say that it's fantastic to have Mark Nash here as well, who was executive producer and collaborator with me on the Franz Fanon film. So the two films that you're going to see this evening, Looking for Langston, 1989, and Franz Fanon, are in a way quite different films. They're approaches to the biopic. Langston Hughes, who you may not be familiarised with, was a kind of poet who came to prominence sort of in New York in the 20s and the 30s, and was seen as, in a way, one of the most important sort of African-American poets. And he basically, for me, was someone who was very inspirational. His poems and the use of poetry, as in a work like 10,000 Ways, is something which has greatly influenced the making of and the visualization of many of my works, and also works like Paradise Amorous, where I collaborated with Derek Walcott, for example. So the use of poetry, in a sense, is something which I want to sort of lend to how I construct works, in terms of how they're edited together, etc. And so in Looking for Langston, it's really the first attempt in trying to perform a kind of meditation on Hughes's poems, but also on his life, because Hughes was someone at this particular moment in time who, in a way, was a very important sort of poet for the African-American race, but he was someone who had this sort of enigmatic sexual identity, and I was very interested in trying to explore this sort of enigma of who was Langston Hughes really. And in a sense, the attitude or the kind of relationship to making the work is not to make a sort of documentary or a sort of film where you're kind of looking for the truth of who was Langston Hughes. It's more a kind of meditation, a kind of poetic meditation, a kind of dreaming of Hughes's life in a way perhaps that may be more related to repressed desires or to his subconsciousness. And so in a way the film is both a meditation on Hughes, but at the time when I made it in 1989, it was a time also when there was a number of different debates taking place, and one of those debates was really around the AIDS crisis, basically the kind of late 80s time where many of my friends were kind of, I was going to funerals every month, and we really didn't know if we were going to make it into the 90s or into the 2000s. It was a very particular moment, and so I think the question of melancholia, or the question of mortality, is also very much embedded in the work as well. And also, it's a black and white film. It's a film which very much looks at the black and white silent cinema as a kind of genre for thinking about silences and repressions. But also at the same time, it's a film which is very much trying to form this kind of lyrical relationship with the past. So it's doing this through poetry, it's doing this through music, and in some ways, I think the relationship between a work like Looking for Langston and 10,000 Ways is very closely related. So in a sense, formally at least, there's similar strategies in the works. And also, the film is a kind of homage to black and white cinema. It's a homage to black and white photography, and indeed it's a film about art. It's a film about the relationship between black artists and modernism, what's their place in history, etc. So there's all of these aspects in it. But it's also a film which is looking at the lives of people like Essex Hemphill, who died in the mid-90s, whose poems are kind of contrasted with Hughes's poems throughout the work. So there's a kind of illustration of the poems, but hopefully beyond illustration, there's a kind of dialogue with his poems, with Hughes's poems, this intergenerational dialogue, which cuts across time by kind of using archival footage and sort of a kind of interweaving of time between past and present in the work. But when this film was released, it was met with a lot of controversy with the Hughes estate, who objected to the association of homoeroticism with Hughes' works in the film. And in a way, I became a kind of cool celeb, or let's say that it was received both in art world context and in the film context. And it's a work which is, in a way, which is taught quite widely, especially in the States, in terms of credit documentary classes, in art schools, etc. So it's a film which was first released in Berlin. I think you're going to be seeing a print that has a Dutch subtitle print. So it was a film which was quite widely distributed in the arts sort of cinema circuit. So that's looking for Langston. And with the Franz Fanon film, which is a kind of slightly different approach to the biopic, Franz Fanon, who was a writer who wrote books like The Wretched of the Earth and Black Skin's White Mask. He, in a sense, this film was made in the moment of what I call Fanon mania. In 1995, at the ICA, Institute of Contemporary Arts in London, had an exhibition called Enigma, and it was a show which had both a conceptual art show component to it. People like Steve McQueen made his first exhibition in that actual show, and also a number of different artists, Glenn Ligon and sort of Rennie Green and myself, and also countering to that exhibition was a conference, and the conference looked at Franz Fanon's theories and his representation. One of the things we were very connected to at that particular moment was looking at questions of identity and race and psychoanalysis. I'm really talking about the kinds of questions which would become quite central questions in Europe in terms of trying to explore this question of identity, and in a way that Franz Fanon, who wrote this book called Black Skin's White Mask, which was like a very interesting sort of text for someone who was quite young. He was 27 when he wrote it at the time. He wrote this kind of thesis of the sort of alienation of the black subject and wrote about psychoanalysis and race. He later became a psychiatrist. He worked in Algeria and became an Algerian citizen. And one of the things that's very interesting, at the time of the war between the French and the Algerians, he, in a way, was working as a psychiatrist and was having to treat Andalusans who were both French and Algerian. And so he, in a way, when he wrote his book, The Wretched of the Earth, I think in the chapter on colonial wars and mental disorders, it's very interesting because in a prophetic sense, I think we can look at that chapter now, post 9/11, and think about all the wars which are taking place in Arab-speaking world. And I think this question of violence, where does violence go, is very much part of a kind of question that Fanon was thinking a lot about when he was analysing his patients. And so for us, at that particular moment in time in London, we were very fascinated with these questions. And of course, it was a moment of post-colonial studies. And so basically it was, in another prophetic sense, a kind of precursor to some of the themes that would enter into an art world sort of discourse. If we think about Documentary 11, the work of people like Opry and Wezo, etc. So in these ways, both these films have this kind of conversation with an art context, and at the same time, they are kind of personal works of mine. And I'll come back later and talk with Mark Nash, who also worked very closely in the way in both these productions after you've seen them. So thank you very much.
Yeah.